We are off to the Principality for round 8, Monaco. I won't say my favorite track, but easily my favorite destination on the Formula One calendar. It's pretty crazy to think that after this weekend we'll already be a third of the way through the season, but for Monaco in this weekend, this is a race that always sticks out and always gets the attention from a lot of the sporting world, but also people who don't really watch Formula One as much. It's called the crown jewel of Formula One for a reason. You watch this race on TV, and you see these million-dollar cars winding around the streets of Monte Carlo with all of these historic buildings and the backdrop of the mountains, and then they speed through the tunnel and come out along the marina around all of these million-dollar yachts. It's truly a spectacle like no other. But for the racing side of things, it hasn't been so great here. I mean, Monaco really gets used as Exhibit A in the arguments of, well, see, the cars are too big for these tracks. Look how boring we've made it. You think it's hard to pass around other tracks. This one takes it to a completely different level. For the most part, whoever gets pole on Saturday usually wins the race on Sunday. Looking back at recent history, that's been the case 14 times in the last 20 races. Maybe you get some pit stop chaos that unexpectedly bumps a driver up into first, but you're probably not getting any true overtakes on track. And you can also get situations like last year where there's a lap 1 crash that brings out a red flag, everyone changes tires under the red flag, and then we don't get any actual pit stops during the race, while everyone's pushing their cars 70 to 80% to be able to make it to the end. It's funny though, a lot of people blame all of this on the size of the current cars and how big they've gotten, which is true. It hasn't made things easier. But a few days ago, I watched a replay of the '96 Monaco Grand Prix where only 3 cars finished that race because everyone was crashing out. It was the same problem. Those cars were so much smaller and you still couldn't pass back then. So personally, I think this is more of a Monaco problem than a car problem. But regardless, something needed to be done. And we finally got that this year with the FIA making it a mandatory 2-stop race, which will be a first in this sport. I like the change a lot. This race is way too prestigious to take off the calendar, but it's been boring. And it's not a good look for the sport, and this was probably the best solution to mix things up. So, what do these new rules entail? It's now mandatory for each driver to make 2 stops during the race opposed to the usual 1 stop, and you're free to make these stops whenever you want. The 2-stop rule also applies even if it's a wet race and cars are on inters or full wets, which probably won't happen this weekend, but you never know around here either. Like the old rules, if there is a red flag and you change tires under the red flag, that can count as one of the stops. There's an interesting clause in these rules, though. If a driver doesn't comply with the 2-stop rule, it's an automatic disqualification. We're not going to see that. No one's going to be stupid enough to just not do the 2 stops knowing they'll be disqualified. But if the race is suspended and not restarted, and a driver hasn't done 2 stops, they get a 30-second time penalty. Probably also pretty unlikely that this will happen, but it's not impossible. Look, we have no idea what strategies teams will go for. I really don't think a team will do a late pit stop for soft tires or anything like that, because what good will it do losing time trying to extend that middle stint and then getting stuck behind slower cars and not being able to pass. But at the same time, it could be tempting for someone out there who's a little further down the order and doesn't have a lot to lose. There could be an advantage of holding out if there's a late VSC or safety car and you get the benefit of getting a cheap pit stop at the end that moves you right up the order. But that would be such a huge risk to take with this clause, because if you're holding out for that late race incident and it brings out a red flag instead, and we're either close to the time limit or the crash is bad enough to call the race, you're screwed. And if you change tires under that red flag, it technically won't count as the second stop because the race order will be determined from the penultimate lap before the red flag came out. A really high risk, really high reward situation. I think it's way too risky for the top teams to try, but you never know with some of these midfield teams. But what kind of tire strategies will we see on Sunday under these new rules? I expect pretty much everyone to start on the soft tires. With how important the running order is here, I don't think you want to risk losing any positions at the start going into turn 1 because you're on slower tires. And if we get an early safety car, the rest of the race becomes a lot more manageable getting that early pit stop and getting the softs out of the way. Now, they did bump down the tire compounds this weekend, but tire degradation is just a complete non-factor here. So even if that early safety car doesn't come, you should still be able to go for a bit on the softs and make it worth it. My best guess is we'll see most drivers go soft, medium, medium, but maybe we see some go soft, medium, soft, depending on how long they can go on that first stint. I think ultimately, though, the tire strategy for the rest of the race really depends on how much the order spreads out during the race. If a team sees a gap that they can pit and come out into, they're going to take it. And it's going to be a situation where one comes in, the rest are right behind them so they don't get undercut, which could end up putting the leader at a huge disadvantage if the cars behind make a late call to pit and the leader doesn't have enough time to react and loses a lap on those older tires. I'm expecting to see those late pit calls on Sunday from the cars in second, third, fourth, trying to catch the cars ahead of them off guard. But we might also see some teamwork happen to help create those gaps too. It's definitely foreseeable that the second driver could intentionally slow down their pace to create a gap that their faster teammate can pit into. If this happens, it's probably much more likely that we'll see it in the midfield teams. Those top teams will just have too much to lose, even with their second driver, to risk losing that much time. Except for maybe Red Bull. Look, it's reality. Yuki's doing better than Liam was in that car, but he's not up there with Max. And if Yuki qualifies towards the bottom of the top 10 and Max is fighting at the top, where they've usually been, this type of strategy could definitely come into play. The fun part about this weekend and this new strategy, though, is everyone is going to be playing the guessing game on Sunday. They have no data to look back on to help them with these strategy calls. There is a perfect strategy out there, but no one can say they 100% know what that is. All right, let's talk some weekend predictions, starting with qualifying, because as we know, qualifying is always exciting at this track. And as we also know, and what will probably still be the case, even with the new two-stop rules, the qualifying results on Saturday will have a huge impact on the race results on Sunday. The extra pit stop does give teams a little more hope, but the further up you are on the order, the better off you're going to be. Ferrari fans, we finally have some good news. We might see another Charles Leclerc Monaco pole. And Lewis isn't that far behind him either. Collectively, they've looked like the fastest cars on track so far. Now, the team decided to bring back the rear wing they used at this track last year, which looks like it's really paying off in a major way. The move was a little out of the ordinary. You don't really see this too much, and it looks like it was mostly for cost cap purposes. But at the same time, they won this race last year with that rear wing, so why not give it a shot again? Now, I'm recording this on Friday night, so we've only seen the first day of cars on track. We still need to see how everything shakes out when qualifying starts, when we know teams have their engines turned all the way up. But Leclerc went fastest in both of Friday's practice sessions, and those times were based on the soft tire runs in each session, and that's why things are looking so promising for Ferrari. It looks like for at least this weekend, they might have solved their biggest weakness, putting together that perfect lap. If they can get this right in qualifying, it could be a very good Sunday for the Scuderia. I'd expect Ferrari's closest competitor to be McLaren this weekend. It's been a little surprising watching them struggle like this so far. And I guess that's a testament to how strong they've been this season, that finishing in the top 5 in both practice sessions but not at the top is a disappointment. But with all of the slow speed corners at this track and how strong McLaren is in that area, you expected more. Now, it might be due to the setup of the car, which can be changed heading into qualifying. Maybe they don't have their engine turned up all the way. But the car just really looked unstable at times. I mean, Oscar crashed into the barriers in FP2, which we really never see from him. Lando was sliding all over the place and launching his car over the curbs. They just don't look too comfortable out there. But even with that, both drivers are still close enough and have a shot at getting pole. Now, I think I like Oscar's chances at pole over Lando's if it does happen for the team, though. Q3 is always nerve-wracking, especially when the field is as close as it's been in qualifying this season. But then you add in how tight this track is with all of these barriers and how easy it is to make a mistake. You add in the pressure of the moment and how each driver has handled that type of pressure so far this year. You have to expect Lando to be more likely to make a mistake than Oscar. And not necessarily one that sends him into the barriers and takes him out completely, but one where he misses the apex slightly, or he hits a curb a little bit too hard and loses a tenth or two that ultimately costs him a chance at pole. The good news for McLaren, though, is if they do miss out on pole, and it's not the best Saturday, they should still be in a good position to recover on Sunday with the pit stops and likely having at least one car on the front row. It doesn't feel right talking about qualifying and not talking about Max Verstappen. I don't really know what to make of his free practice runs. Just a tenth and a half off the pace in FP1, but 7/10 off the pace in FP2. He didn't have the best laps in FP2, so I think that's why we saw the dip in performance. But look, I'm not falling for it again. I fully expect Max to show up to qualifying and have a real shot at pole. Red Bull is so good at perfecting the setup going into Saturday, and Max, having won this race twice, having gotten pole off that legendary qualifying performance in 2023, he's going to have the confidence that will give him a chance to steal this away from the Ferraris or McLarens. I think those four drivers are the only ones who really have a shot at pole, though. Lewis will probably be close, but I don't think he's going to have enough to get ahead of Leclerc, or maybe even get ahead of the McLarens. Mercedes just isn't looking quick enough so far, and this is a track where you would expect them to struggle a little bit anyways. Williams has looked good, but not good enough to compete at the top, and the rest of the grid, they never really have a shot at pole. So my pole predictions. Give me the hometown kid, Charles Leclerc. We haven't seen it much this year, but he's always been such a strong qualifier, and I think he gets that mojo back this weekend. And we've already seen it to an extent. He looks so much more confident and relaxed around this track, but especially now that he's gotten the monkey off his back with the Monaco curse. Behind him, I like the two McLarens, with Oscar P2 and Lando P3. Like I said before, they have enough to get on pole, but something's not right, whether it's the car or the driver, but I think both will make a few minor mistakes that are just enough to take them out of contention for that top spot. Behind those two, I have Max in P4, Lewis in P5. I don't think it'll be much, but I think they'll just be a tad bit off the pace from Leclerc and the two McLarens. I expect it to be a very close Saturday in qualifying. It might not be what it used to be now that we have a two-stop race, but it should still be a thrilling hour at the track. Going to Sunday, hey, I might be right with my poll predictions, I might be wrong, but what I do know is whatever the order is, I expect that to determine a lot for Sunday. Two things to watch out for. Like I said earlier when we were talking about tire strategies, watch out for those cars in the top 5 coming in early for a surprise pit stop if the gap is there. It'll take a lot of preparation and execution for a team to really pull this off subtly so that it catches the car or cars ahead of them off guard. But it can be done. The other thing to watch out for is the disadvantage the second Ferrari, McLaren, and even Mercedes driver will have with pit strategies. There's a good chance the cars will be too close to double stack, which means the second driver is forced to stay out an extra lap and will probably lose a decent chunk of time. I expect that to be Lando. I expect that to be Lewis. I expect that to be Kimi if it comes to it with Mercedes. We always see the second car at a disadvantage with pit stops, but it'll be amplified here if both cars are on the same strategy. My podium predictions for Sunday: P3, Max Verstappen; P2, Oscar Piastri; and P1, Charles Leclerc. I think Charles has a chance to really run away with this. Now, a lot of that will come down to whether he gets pole, and if he does, whether he comes out of turn 1 in the lead. But the pace they've shown so far is a step ahead. And if Charles stays ahead after lap 1, he could have enough to pull away and take away any threats of being undercut. He just needs to keep the demons of the Monaco curse away and the Ferrari demons away with their pit strategy. I've got Oscar in P2 for two main reasons. He has enough to get on the front row, but more importantly, out-qualify Lando. And he'll be at a huge advantage having priority with pit stops and not losing time being the second car. I do think, over race pace though, he and Leclerc will probably be able to pull away from the Red Bulls, from the other McLaren, from everyone else behind them. I just don't think Oscar will have enough to actually get past Leclerc. Give me Max in P3 also thanks to some pit strategy advantages though. I don't really think he'll be faster than Lando, but what I do think is very likely is Max undercutting Lando during those first pit stops and Lando just not being able to get back ahead of him. So obviously for me that puts Lando P4, Lewis likely in P5, and then we're probably going to get a mix of the Mercedes, the Williams, and Yuki followed behind. I'm excited for Sunday though. This is setting up to be a very exciting race with this twist to pit strategies, and I can't wait to see the different approaches we see from some of these teams as they try to figure all of this out for the first time. Alright, that'll do it for today's episode previewing the Monaco Grand Prix. I will, of course, be back on Sunday with another episode recapping both qualifying and the Grand Prix. I'm crossing my fingers, but I really think we'll have a decent amount to talk about on Sunday's episode. I really think this new rule change with the pit stops is going to change a lot and is really going to add some excitement to this race. And we'll see who's jumping in the swimming pool or marina on Sunday. Thank you to everyone for tuning in and listening. Until next time.